The morning sun filtered through the county courthouse windows, casting long rectangles of light across the worn wooden benches. Andre Collins checked his watch and shifted uncomfortably on the hard seat. He hadn't planned on spending his day off in traffic court, but the ticket for the alleged rolling stop had been bothering him for weeks. He knew he had come to a complete stop at that intersection. He always did. Andre wore a plain navy t-shirt and jeans, comfortable clothes for what he had originally planned as a day of yard work and relaxing. Around him, people from all walks of life waited their turn. An elderly woman clutching her purse tightly, a young man in work clothes anxiously checking the time, and several others thumbing through their phones to pass the time. "All rise," called the bailiff as Judge Richard Blackwood entered the courtroom. The judge's face carried the stern lines of someone who had heard every excuse in the book. His silver hair was neatly combed, and his black robe swayed slightly as he took his seat at the bench. The bailiff continued. "Court is now in session, the Honorable Judge Blackwood presiding." Andre observed as the judge worked through the docket. He noticed something interesting. Judge Blackwood seemed to have two distinct approaches. With some defendants, he was almost fatherly, patient, understanding, willing to reduce fines or offer payment plans. With others, particularly people of color, his demeanor shifted subtly. His tone grew curt, his questions more pointed, his rulings less flexible. Case number 47, Thomas Wilson, speeding, 15 miles over the limit, called the clerk. A middle-aged white man in a business suit approached the bench. "Good morning, Your Honor." "Morning, Mr. Wilson. First offense?" "Yes, sir." Judge Blackwood nodded thoughtfully. "We all have our moments. Fine reduced to $75. Pay the clerk on your way out." "Thank you, Your Honor," Wilson said, relief washing over his face. Andre made mental notes as he watched 3 more cases unfold with similar leniency. Then came a young Hispanic woman who received a much harsher fine for the same offense as Wilson. She tried to explain that she had been rushing her sick child to the doctor, but the judge cut her off mid-sentence. The law doesn't make exceptions for personal emergencies. "Ms. Rodriguez, next time call an ambulance. $250 fine." The pattern continued, and Andre felt his stomach tighten. After practicing law for 12 years, he recognized systemic bias when he saw it, but it never ceased to disappoint him. Case number 53, Andre Collins, failure to come to a complete stop. Andre stood and approached the bench. "Good morning, Your Honor." Judge Blackwood barely looked up from his papers. His eyes flicked over Andre's casual clothes, and his mouth tightened almost imperceptibly. "Says here you rolled through a stop sign on Oak Street," the judge said flatly. "Your Honor, I'd like to respectfully dispute that. I came to a complete stop at that intersection." The judge's eyebrows rose slightly. "Are you saying the officer lied?" "No, Your Honor. I'm saying there may have been a matter of perspective. I have dashcam footage that shows—" "Mr. Collins," Judge Blackwood interrupted, his voice taking on an edge that hadn't been present with other defendants. "This court doesn't have time to review dashcam footage for every minor traffic violation. The officer's testimony is considered reliable evidence." Andre noticed a couple nearby exchanging glances. The woman whispered something to her husband, who nodded with a frown. "With all due respect, Your Honor, I noticed that you allowed Mr. Peterson to present his evidence just a few minutes ago." A flash of irritation crossed the judge's face. Mr. Peterson's situation was different. "In what way, if I may ask?" Andre kept his tone respectful but firm. The courtroom had grown quieter. The clerk glanced up from her computer, her fingers pausing over the keyboard. "Mr. Collins, are you questioning my judgment?" The judge's voice had dropped to a dangerous tone. "No. Your Honor, I'm simply trying to understand the process." Andre maintained steady eye contact with the judge, something he had learned to do in countless high-pressure situations. Judge Blackwood shuffled some papers on his desk. "The fine is $200. Pay the clerk on your way out." Andre blinked in surprise. The standard fine for this violation was typically $75 to $100, as evidenced by the previous cases he'd just witnessed. "Your Honor, that's double the amount of similar violations I've observed today." The courtroom fell completely silent. Even the bailiff, a tall officer with a usually impassive face, shifted uncomfortably. Judge Blackwood leaned forward. "Perhaps you'd like to make it $300 for contempt of court." Andre took a deep breath. After years in courtrooms, he knew when to press and when to retreat. This wasn't the time or place. No, Your Honor. Good. $200. Next case. As Andre turned to leave, he noticed the court reporter watching him with an expression that seemed almost apologetic. He walked to the clerk's desk, his mind already calculating his next steps. This wasn't just about a traffic ticket anymore. While waiting to pay his fine, Andre overheard a conversation between two attorneys near the water cooler. "Blackwood's at it again," one whispered. "Third time this week I've seen it," the other replied. "Someone should report him to the Judicial Conduct Board. Who's going to risk their career over traffic court bias?" Andre stepped forward to pay his fine. The clerk, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, processed his payment without meeting his gaze. "Is he always like this?" Andre asked quietly. The clerk glanced around before responding. "I can't comment on judicial conduct." "I understand," as she handed him his receipt. She added in a near whisper, "But if you check the court records, they're public information." Andre nodded his thanks and tucked the receipt into his wallet. Outside the courtroom, he pulled out his phone and began making calls. The first was to his office. "This is Collins," he said when his assistant answered. "I need you to pull some files for me. I'm going to be looking into judicial conduct patterns in county traffic court." "Right away, sir. Should I alert Director Reynolds that you'll be late for the afternoon briefing?" "Yes, and tell her I might have a new case of interest for our department." Andre ended the call and sat on a bench in the courthouse hallway, his mind working through the legal angles. As a federal prosecutor specializing in civil rights violations, he had seen how small injustices often revealed larger patterns of discrimination. Two lawyers walked past, then stopped when they recognized him. "Collins, what brings you down from the federal building?" one asked, surprised to see him in casual clothes. "Just handling a personal matter," Andre replied, not wanting to discuss the incident until he had gathered more information. "Well, good to see you. We're still on for the Bar Association meeting tomorrow. Wouldn't miss it," Andre replied with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. As the attorneys walked away, Andre noticed the bailiff from Judge Blackwood's courtroom watching him with newfound recognition. The officer quickly averted his gaze and hurried away. Andre smiled to himself as he walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sun. Judge Blackwood had no idea who he'd just fined, but he would find out soon enough. This wasn't just about a traffic ticket or even about Andre personally. It was about a pattern of behavior that affected countless people who didn't have the knowledge or resources to fight back. He climbed into his car and placed his phone on the dashboard mount. "Call Diane," he instructed the voice system. "Andre, how did traffic court go?" His wife's voice came through the speakers. "Let's just say it was enlightening," he replied. "And I might be bringing some work home tonight." "That bad, huh?" "That important," Andre corrected. "Sometimes you need to experience something firsthand to truly understand it." As he pulled away from the courthouse, Andre glanced back at the imposing building in his rearview mirror. In his 12 years as a federal prosecutor, he had learned that justice sometimes required someone willing to challenge the system from within. Today, Judge Blackwood had unknowingly provided him with exactly the opportunity he needed to do just that. Andre sat at his kitchen table that evening, spreading out papers and opening his laptop. The harsh overhead light cast sharp shadows across the polished wood as he typed in his password. His wife Diane placed a mug of coffee next to him and peered over his shoulder. "Public record search?" she asked, resting her hand on his shoulder. Andre nodded. "I need to see if what happened today was a one-off or a pattern." "You think it wasn't just a bad day for the judge?" "I've been in enough courtrooms to know the difference between a bad day and something more troubling." Andre took a sip of coffee and grimaced. "What I saw today looked systematic. The judge had one approach for white defendants and another for everyone else." Diane pulled out a chair and sat beside him. As a social worker, she understood systems of inequality better than most. "What are you looking for specifically?" "Traffic court records. Fines issued by Judge Blackwood over the past year, broken down by demographics if possible." Andre's fingers moved quickly across the keyboard. The clerk hinted that the records might tell a story. The county court database was public but not user-friendly. Andre navigated through several screens, downloading CSV files of court records. After an hour of sorting and analyzing, a clear picture emerged. Judge Blackwood's fines for identical violations showed a disturbing pattern. Defendants with traditionally white-sounding names received fines averaging $85, while those with names suggesting other ethnic backgrounds faced average fines of $175. This can't be coincidence, Andre said, turning the laptop so Diane could see the spreadsheet. Look at the consistency of it. Diane's expression darkened as she scanned the numbers. Are you going to report this? First, I need more evidence. Tomorrow I'm going back to the courthouse to pull the audio recordings. Be careful, Diane warned. Judges protect their own. Andre smiled grimly. So does the Department of Justice. The next morning, Andre arrived at the courthouse wearing a crisp suit and carrying his federal prosecutor's badge. He had decided against using his position to intimidate, preferring instead to gather evidence quietly. He approached the court administrator's office and requested the audio recordings from yesterday's proceedings. The administrator, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, looked up from his computer. Those won't be transcribed for at least a week, sir. I don't need the transcription, just the audio files, Andre explained. It's for a review we're conducting. The administrator's eyes narrowed slightly. Andre considered his options, then decided to be straightforward. He displayed his Justice Department credentials. Federal Review of Court Proceedings. Standard procedure. The administrator's demeanor shifted immediately. Of course, Mr. Collins. I'll have those files ready for you within the hour. Would you like yesterday's session only, or the past 2 weeks would be helpful? Andre replied casually. And if you could include any written complaints filed against Judge Blackwood in the past year, that would save me some paperwork. Complaints? The administrator's voice rose slightly. I'm not sure I have the authority to. They're public record, Andre reminded him gently. But if you prefer, I can file a formal request through channels. It would just take longer and generate more attention. The administrator got the message. I'll see what I can do. Andre thanked him and took a seat in the waiting area. While he waited, he noticed a young court clerk watching him curiously. After a moment, she approached. Excuse me, she said quietly. Are you here about Judge Blackwood? Andre kept his expression neutral. Why do you ask? The woman glanced around before continuing. I've been keeping my own records, times when his ruling seemed off. She slid a small notebook across the table. Page 27 is where I started noting the pattern. Andre opened the notebook. Inside were meticulous notes dating back 6 months, documenting discrepancies in fines, dismissive language, and interrupted testimonies, all correlated with the apparent race or ethnicity of defendants. This is very thorough, Andre said, impressed by the young woman's attention to detail. Why did you start keeping these records? My brother got a $250 fine for going 5 miles over the speed limit, she explained. The white guy before him got a warning for going 15 over. After that, I started paying attention. Andre pulled out a business card and handed it to her. Would you be willing to make a formal statement? Her eyes widened as she read his title. You're a federal prosecutor? Yes. Is that why you were in traffic court yesterday? Undercover? Andre smiled. No, just a citizen getting an unfair traffic ticket. But sometimes life gives you an opportunity to address a bigger problem. The clerk pocketed his card. I'll think about it. Some of us need our jobs, I understand. Your notebook is very helpful, but I'll need official records to build a case. Just then, the administrator returned with a flash drive. Here are the audio files, Mr. Collins. I've included the past 2 weeks of Judge Blackwood's traffic court sessions. He hesitated. About those complaints? Yes. There were 17 filed in the past year. Most were dismissed without investigation. Andre raised an eyebrow. 17 is quite a few for a traffic court judge. Yes, well, the administrator looked uncomfortable. Judge Blackwood has connections on the county board. I see. Andre pocketed the flash drive. Thank you for your help. As Andre left the administration office, he nearly collided with Judge Blackwood himself. The older man looked startled to see Andre in a suit, his expression changing from confusion to wariness. Good morning, Your Honor, Andre said politely. Judge Blackwood nodded stiffly. You were in my courtroom yesterday. Yes, sir. Andre Collins. He deliberately didn't mention his profession. The judge's eyes narrowed. What brings you back today, Mr. Collins? Paying your fine? Already paid. Just following up on some details. With administration. The judge's tone was suspicious. Andre smiled pleasantly. Public records research. Have a good day, Your Honor. As Andre walked away, he could feel the judge's eyes boring into his back. The encounter confirmed his suspicions. Blackwood remembered him, which meant Andre wasn't just another face in a busy courtroom. The judge had been aware of who he was treating unfairly. Back at his federal office, Andre closed the door and began reviewing the audio files. The recordings confirmed what he had witnessed. Judge Blackwood consistently interrupted non-white defendants, used a dismissive tone, and issued harsher penalties for identical violations. His assistant knocked on the door. Director Reynolds wants to see you. Andre found his boss reviewing case files in her office. Patricia Reynolds had been with the Justice Department for 25 years and had a reputation for taking on difficult cases. I hear you're looking into a county judge, she said without preamble. Andre wasn't surprised that word had traveled fast. Judge Richard Blackwood. I have evidence suggesting a pattern of discriminatory sentencing based on race. Director Reynolds leaned back in her chair. And this came to your attention how? I experienced it firsthand yesterday in traffic court. Ah, she nodded, understanding. Personal experience can be motivating. What do you have so far? Andre outlined his findings. The statistical analysis of fines, the audio recordings, the notebook from the clerk, and the dismissed complaints. Director Reynolds listened attentively. It sounds promising, but county judges are politically connected. We'd need an airtight case. I'm working on it, Andre assured her. There's a judicial conference next week where Blackwood is scheduled to speak. I'll be there too, presenting on prosecutorial ethics. Interesting timing, Reynolds remarked with a slight smile. I assume you're not planning anything unprofessional? Not at all, Andre replied. Just a coincidental opportunity to observe how he interacts with his peers, and perhaps to see his reaction when he realizes who I am. Tread carefully, Andre. Judges protect their own. You're the second person to tell me that in 24 hours. Smart people thinking alike, Reynolds said. Keep me updated. If this pans out, it could be an important case for establishing accountability in the lower courts. Andre returned to his office and continued building his case. He requested demographic data on all traffic stops in the county, analyzed fine distributions across different judges, and began drafting a formal investigation proposal. As he worked, his phone chimed with a text from Diane. How's it going? He typed back, building the case. Judge recognized me today. Her response came quickly. Be careful. Powerful people can be dangerous when cornered. Andre put down his phone and looked at the stack of evidence growing on his desk. What had started as a simple traffic ticket was evolving into something much more significant. He wasn't just fighting for himself now, but for every person who had sat in that courtroom, feeling powerless as justice was applied unevenly. The judicial conference was 6 days away. By then, he would be ready to take the next step in holding Judge Blackwood accountable. The county law library was quiet except for the occasional turning of pages and the soft tap of fingers on keyboards. Andre sat at a corner table surrounded by legal journals and printouts of court cases. He had been there for 3 hours, researching precedents for judicial misconduct cases. The conference was now just 4 days away. His phone vibrated against the wooden table. It was a text from the court clerk who had given him her notebook. Judge B asking questions about you. Requested info on all visitors to admin office on Tuesday. Andre frowned. He had expected some pushback, but not so quickly. He texted back, thanks for the heads up. Be careful. Don't put yourself at risk. 3 dots appeared then. Already made copies of everything. Left the originals in my desk where they'll be found if someone searches. Andre smiled. The clerk was smart, creating a paper trail that would be discovered if Blackwood tried to intimidate her. He replied with a simple, good thinking, and returned to his research. A moment later, another text came through, this time from his colleague Lewis at the federal prosecutor's office. Got the statistical analysis you requested. Results are striking. When can you meet? Library. 1 hour, Andre replied. He gathered his materials and moved to a more private study room in the back of the library. While waiting for Lewis, he reviewed his notes from the audio recordings. He had identified 27 instances where Judge Blackwood had cut off non-white defendants mid-explanation, compared to only 3 interruptions of white defendants across the same number of cases. The door opened, and Lewis entered with a folder tucked under his arm. He was a data analyst who specialized in identifying patterns of discrimination for federal cases. "This is fascinating stuff," Lewis said without preamble, spreading charts across the table. "I ran the numbers 3 different ways to be sure." Andre leaned forward. "What did you find?" "In the past 18 months, Blackwood has presided over approximately 3,200 traffic cases. When controlling for offense type, prior record, and time of day, there's a statistically significant difference in both fine amounts and dismissal rates based on apparent race or ethnicity." "How significant?" Andre asked. Lewis pointed to a graph. "Non-white defendants are 3.7 times more likely to receive the maximum fine and 5.2 times less likely to have their case dismissed." "That's even worse than I thought," Andre said quietly. "There's more," Lewis continued. "I cross-referenced with other judges in the same courthouse. None of the others show this pattern to a statistically significant degree. So it's not a systemic courthouse issue. It's specific to Blackwood." "Exactly." Lewis handed over a USB drive. "All the raw data and analysis are here. It's as close to a smoking gun as you're going to get without a confession." Andre pocketed the drive. "This is excellent work, Lewis, thank you. What's your next move?" "The judicial conference on Friday. Blackwood is presenting on fairness in traffic court of all things." Lewis raised his eyebrows. "The irony. I'm presenting too, right after him. On prosecutorial ethics and implicit bias." "Perfect timing," Lewis chuckled. "Does he know who you are yet?" "I don't think so. He recognized me from traffic court, but he doesn't know I'm a federal prosecutor." Just then, Andre's phone rang. It was Director Reynolds. "Andre, we have a situation," she said when he answered. "Judge Blackwood just called the U.S. attorney complaining about harassment from our office. He specifically mentioned you." Andre straightened in his chair. "What did he say?" "That you're pursuing a personal vendetta because of a traffic ticket. He's threatening to file a formal complaint." "That's interesting timing," Andre said. "I just received statistical evidence confirming the pattern of discrimination. Feel the U.S. attorney wants to meet with both of us in an hour." "I'll be there," Andre ended the call and turned to Lewis. "Blackwood is trying to get ahead of this. He's complaining to the U.S. attorney. He must have figured out who you are." "Probably." Andre gathered his materials. "I need to get back to the office. Can you finish documenting these audio timestamps?" Lewis nodded. "I've got it covered." An hour later, Andre sat in the U.S. attorney's office alongside Director Reynolds. The U.S. attorney, Robert Chen, was reviewing the preliminary report Andre had prepared. "This is concerning," Chen said finally, setting down the report. "But Judge Blackwood is well connected. He's golfing buddies with 2 state senators and a federal judge." "With respect, sir," Andre replied. "That makes addressing his misconduct more important, not less." Chen nodded slowly. "I agree, but we need to be strategic. A direct confrontation could backfire. What do you suggest?" Director Reynolds asked. "Document everything, build an irrefutable case, then present it through proper channels to the Judicial Conduct Board." Chen looked at Andre. "No personal confrontations, no hint of a vendetta." "I understand," Andre said, "but I'm still scheduled to present at the judicial conference where Blackwood will be." "Good. Attend as planned. Be professional. Document any reactions." Chen leaned forward. "But don't tip your hand about the investigation." That evening, Andre received an unexpected visitor at his office. The bailiff from Judge Blackwood's courtroom, Officer Torres, stood awkwardly in the doorway. "Do you have a minute, Mr. Collins?" Andre gestured to a chair. "Of course. What can I do for you?" Torres closed the door before sitting. "I heard you're looking into Judge Blackwood's conduct. What makes you say that?" "Word travels fast in the courthouse." Torres fidgeted with his hat. "I've worked in his courtroom for 3 years. I've seen things that haven't felt right." Andre maintained a neutral expression, such as comments he makes when defendants can't hear, how he shuffles the docket to group certain types of people together, the different tones he uses. Torres looked down. "I should have said something sooner. Why didn't you?" "I have a family. 2 kids in college. I can't afford to lose my job." Andre nodded, understanding. "What changed your mind?" "Yesterday, after you left the courthouse, I overheard him talking to the county attorney. He referred to you using a racial slur, said he was going to put you in your place." Torres looked up, meeting Andre's eyes. "That crossed a line for me." Andre felt a cold anger but kept his voice steady. Would you be willing to make a statement? That's why I'm here. Torres handed over a sealed envelope. I've been keeping notes too, dates and quotes. It's all in there. And yes, I'll testify if needed. After Torres left, Andre opened the envelope. Inside was a detailed account of incidents spanning 3 years. A damning record of Judge Blackwood's behavior behind closed doors. The next morning, Andre attended traffic court again, this time sitting quietly in the back row. He wasn't there to confront Blackwood but to observe. He wanted to see if the judge's behavior had changed. Now that he knew he was being watched, it hadn't. If anything, Blackwood seemed more defiant, more obvious in his disparate treatment. When an older black woman tried to explain that her taillight had been working when she left home, the judge interrupted. If I had $1 for every time I heard that excuse, I could retire to Florida. The white man after her, with the exact same violation, received a patient hearing and a reduced fine. Andre made notes discreetly on his phone. 2 rows ahead, he noticed the young clerk who had given him her notebook. She caught his eye briefly and gave a small nod before returning her attention to her work. As court adjourned, Andre slipped out before Judge Blackwood could spot him. In the hallway, he bumped into a defense attorney he knew from previous cases. Andre, what brings you to the land of traffic violations? The attorney asked. Research, Andre replied vaguely. The attorney lowered his voice. Word is you're building a case against Blackwood. About time someone did. I can't comment on that. Well, if you need statements from defense counsel, there's no shortage of us who've witnessed his behavior. The attorney handed Andre his card. Call me if you need anything. Many of us have complained for years, but the county board just circles the wagons. Thanks. I'll keep that in mind. As Andre walked toward the exit, his phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from the judicial conference organizers, confirming his presentation slot. Immediately following Judge Blackwood's talk on maintaining fairness in traffic court proceedings. The conference was now just 2 days away. By then, Andre would have compiled all the evidence, prepared his report for the Judicial Conduct Board, and be ready to take the next step in addressing Judge Blackwood's pattern of discrimination. What the judge didn't know was that his presentation on fairness would be followed by the very man he had discriminated against, a federal prosecutor, specializing in civil rights violations. Andre smiled slightly as he stepped out into the sunshine. Sometimes justice had a sense of irony. The morning of the judicial conference arrived with gray skies and a light drizzle. Andre stood before his bathroom mirror, adjusting his tie and rehearsing key points from his presentation. The conference center was downtown, at the Riverside Hotel, one of the most prestigious venues in the city. Every important figure in the local legal community would be there. You look sharp, Diane said, leaning against the doorframe. Ready for the big reveal? Andre smiled at his wife's reflection. It's not about the reveal. It's about starting a necessary conversation. Still, Diane said, straightening his already perfect tie, I wish I could see his face when he realizes who you are. I'm more interested in what happens after. This isn't about embarrassing one judge. It's about addressing a pattern that affects real people every day. Diane nodded. I know. That's why you're the right person for this. Just be careful. Men like Blackwood don't like being challenged. Andre checked his watch. I should go. My presentation is at 11:30, right after Blackwood's. Call me when it's over, Diane said, kissing him goodbye. The drive downtown gave Andre time to think. His investigation had produced solid evidence of Judge Blackwood's pattern of discrimination. The statistical analysis was irrefutable, the audio recordings damning, and the testimonies from courthouse staff compelling. After the conference, he would submit the complete file to the Judicial Conduct Board, with the U.S. Attorney's backing. But today wasn't about the formal complaint. Today was about putting Judge Blackwood on notice and letting him know that his actions were being watched. The Riverside Hotel's grand ballroom had been transformed into a conference hall. Round tables with crisp white tablecloths filled the space, each with a centerpiece of fresh flowers. At the front, a podium stood on a small stage, flanked by screens for presentations. Andre checked in at the registration desk and received his name badge and conference materials. He scanned the room, noting familiar faces from the legal community. In one corner, He spotted Judge Blackwood surrounded by a group of admiring attorneys laughing at something the judge had said. "Andre Collins, didn't expect to see you here." Andre turned to find Judge Michael Patel, a federal judge he had appeared before many times. "Good morning, Your Honor," Andre said, shaking the judge's hand. "I'm presenting today on prosecutorial ethics. Excellent topic. We need more focus on ethical considerations at all levels." Judge Patel lowered his voice. "I hear you've been looking into Richard Blackwood." Andre kept his expression neutral. "News travels fast. The legal community is a small world." Judge Patel glanced across the room at Blackwood. "Between us, many of my colleagues have concerns about his courtroom conduct, but no one has been willing to rock the boat." "Sometimes the boat needs rocking," Andre replied. Judge Patel smiled. "Indeed. I look forward to your presentation." As the judge moved away, Andre found a seat near the back of the room. From this vantage point, he could observe without being immediately noticed. The conference began with introductory remarks from the chief judge of the county court system, followed by a panel discussion on case management. Throughout the morning, Andre noticed Blackwood glancing at the agenda, probably reviewing his own upcoming presentation. Finally, it was time. The moderator stepped to the podium. "Our next speaker is Judge Richard Blackwood, who will address maintaining fairness in traffic court proceedings." Judge Blackwood has presided over the county traffic court for the past 5 years and has processed more cases than any other judge in the system. Please welcome Judge Blackwood. Applause filled the room as Blackwood took the stage. He adjusted his glasses and smiled confidently at the audience. "Thank you for that kind introduction. As many of you know, traffic court is often the only interaction most citizens have with our justice system. It shapes their perception of the law and either builds or erodes their trust in our institutions." Andre watched as Blackwood launched into a well-rehearsed speech about the importance of giving every defendant a fair hearing, treating everyone with respect, and ensuring consistent application of the law. The irony wasn't lost on him. Blackwood was describing exactly the opposite of what he practiced. "In my courtroom," Blackwood continued, "I strive to ensure that each person feels heard, that the process is transparent, and that outcomes are consistent regardless of who stands before me." Andre noticed several attorneys exchanging glances. Clearly, Blackwood's reputation didn't match his words. The judge concluded his presentation to polite applause. The moderator returned to the podium. "Thank you, Judge Blackwood, for those insights. Our next speaker will address a complementary topic: prosecutorial ethics and addressing implicit bias. Please welcome Federal Prosecutor Andre Collins from the Department of Justice." As Andre stood and made his way to the stage, he caught the exact moment when recognition dawned on Judge Blackwood's face. The judge's expression froze, then shifted from confusion to shock as Andre walked past him toward the podium. "Thank you," Andre said, setting up his presentation slides. He looked directly at Judge Blackwood, who had taken a seat in the front row, his face now ashen. "As was mentioned, I'm Andre Collins, federal prosecutor specializing in civil rights cases within the Department of Justice." The room was quiet, attentive. Andre clicked to his first slide. "My work focuses on ensuring that our justice system lives up to its highest ideals: equal treatment under the law for all citizens, regardless of race, ethnicity, or economic status." He proceeded with his planned presentation, discussing how implicit bias can affect decision-making, even among well-intentioned legal professionals. Throughout, he avoided directly referencing Judge Blackwood, but many of his examples mirrored the patterns he had documented in Blackwood's courtroom. Recent studies have shown that discrepancies in fines and sentencing for identical offenses can vary significantly based on the defendant's apparent race, Andre explained, showing a graph similar to the one Lewis had prepared, though without identifying the source of the data. From his position at the podium, Andre could see Judge Blackwood shifting uncomfortably, his eyes darting around the room as if gauging whether others were making the connection. When a defendant is interrupted more frequently, given less time to explain their circumstances, or receives harsher penalties for the same offense as others, it erodes trust in our entire legal system, Andre continued. And as public servants, we have a responsibility to examine our own practices, to welcome oversight, and to be accountable for our actions. As Andre concluded his presentation, the room erupted in applause. noticeably more enthusiastic than what Blackwood had received. Several judges and attorneys nodded in agreement with his points. During the Q&A session that followed, a defense attorney raised her hand. "Mr. Collins, have you observed these patterns of bias in our local courts?" Andre chose his words carefully. "I've observed various patterns across multiple jurisdictions. My office is currently reviewing data from several local courts to identify any significant disparities that may exist." He noticed Judge Blackwood stand abruptly and exit the room through a side door. When the session ended, Andre was surrounded by colleagues offering support and sharing their own observations. Judge Patel approached with a knowing smile. "Excellent presentation, Andre. Very timely." "Thank you, Your Honor." Blackwood left in quite a hurry, Patel observed. "I don't think I've ever seen him miss a networking opportunity." Andre nodded. "I imagine he has a lot to think about." As the crowd dispersed for the lunch break, Andre checked his phone. There was a text from the court clerk. "B called courthouse, demanding all records of your visits be pulled. Sounds panicked." Another message followed from Officer Torres. "Judge left conference early. Headed to courthouse. Looked upset." Andre texted back to both. "Stay calm. Don't engage. We have everything documented." He was about to put his phone away when it rang. "Director Reynolds, how did it go?" she asked without preamble. "As expected. Blackwood recognized me and left abruptly after my presentation." "Good. The U.S. attorney just got a call from the chief judge. Apparently Blackwood is claiming harassment and threatening to file a complaint against you." "That was fast," Andre remarked. "It means he's scared." The chief judge actually seemed receptive when the U.S. attorney mentioned we have evidence of a pattern of discrimination. "He's requested a meeting tomorrow. I'll be ready," Andre said. As he ended the call, Andre spotted Judge Blackwood's presentation materials still at the podium, where he'd left them in his hasty exit. The irony struck him again. A presentation on fairness abandoned by a judge now facing scrutiny for unfairness. Andre packed up his own materials and headed to his car. The confrontation was just beginning, but the first step had been taken. Judge Blackwood now knew that his actions were being watched and documented, and that the man he had discriminated against in traffic court had the authority and resources to hold him accountable. As he drove away from the hotel, Andre felt not triumph but determination. This wasn't about winning a personal battle against one biased judge. It was about ensuring that every person who entered a courtroom received the fair treatment they deserved under the law. The morning after the conference, Andre sat in the chief judge's office alongside Director Reynolds and U.S. Attorney Chen. Across from them, Chief Judge Eleanor Winters reviewed the evidence folder Andre had prepared. Her expression remained neutral, but her eyes widened slightly at certain pages. "This is concerning," she said finally, closing the folder. "Very concerning. We believe it warrants a formal investigation by the Judicial Conduct Board," Chen said. Chief Judge Winters nodded slowly. "I agree. I've known Richard Blackwood for 15 years. This is unexpected." Andre had anticipated denial or defensiveness. The chief judge's willingness to acknowledge the evidence surprised him. "Judge Blackwood called me last night," she continued. "He was quite agitated, claiming harassment. Now I understand why." She looked directly at Andre. "He didn't know who you were when he fined you, did he?" "No, Your Honor. I was just another person in his courtroom. And that's precisely what makes this so troubling." She tapped the folder. "The pattern here suggests this wasn't an isolated incident." "It wasn't," Andre confirmed. "The statistical analysis shows a clear disparity in how defendants are treated based on their apparent race or ethnicity." Chief Judge Winters sighed. "I'm initiating a formal review immediately. Judge Blackwood will be temporarily reassigned to administrative duties pending the outcome." "Thank you, Your Honor," Director Reynolds said. "We appreciate your taking this seriously." "The integrity of our courts depends on fairness," the chief judge replied. "No one is above accountability." She looked at Andre again. "Mr. Collins, I want to apologize for your experience in our court system. It falls far short of what we aspire to." "I appreciate that," Andre said. "But my concern is for everyone who enters that courtroom without the knowledge or resources to challenge unfair treatment." "A valid concern. One I share." She stood, signaling the end of the meeting. I'll need copies of all your evidence for the Judicial Conduct Board. The review process typically takes 30 to 60 days. As they left the Chief Judge's office, Chen looked impressed. That went better than expected. Judge Winters has a reputation for integrity, Reynolds remarked. Not everyone circles the wagons to protect their own. This is just the beginning, Andre cautioned. Blackwood won't go down without a fight. He was right. 2 days later, Andre received notice that Judge Blackwood had filed a formal complaint against him, alleging misuse of federal authority for personal vendetta. The complaint demanded that Andre be removed from any involvement in the investigation. Predictable, Director Reynolds said when Andre showed her the complaint. He's trying to make you the issue instead of his own conduct. Will it work? Andre asked. Not likely. The U.S. Attorney has already spoken with the Department of Justice Ethics Office. Since you weren't acting in your official capacity when you received the ticket, and you followed proper channels for the investigation, there's no conflict of interest. Over the next several weeks, the case took unexpected turns. Local media got wind of the investigation, and the story spread. Federal prosecutor uncovers pattern of judicial bias after personal experience. Andre declined interview requests, focusing instead on cooperating with the Judicial Conduct Board's review. More courthouse employees came forward with statements. Clerks, security officers, even another judge who had observed Blackwood's behavior. The young clerk who had given Andre her notebook became a key witness, presenting her meticulous documentation of disparities in Blackwood's courtroom. The defense attorney community mobilized, compiling their own records of troubling patterns they had observed. What had started as one man's experience was becoming a watershed moment for the local justice system. 6 weeks after the conference, the Judicial Conduct Board scheduled a formal hearing. Andre would testify about his experience and present the evidence he had gathered. The night before the hearing, he sat with Diane in their living room, reviewing his statement one last time. "Are you nervous?" she asked. Andre considered the question. "Not about testifying. I've done that hundreds of times." He set down his papers. "I'm thinking about all the people who faced the same treatment but couldn't fight back. How many lives were affected by these small injustices that add up to something much bigger?" Diane took his hand. "That's why this matters. It's bigger than one judge or one courtroom." "I know," Andre said. "That's why we have to get it right." The hearing room was packed. Judge Blackwood sat with his attorney, his expression stony. He didn't look at Andre when he entered. Over the course of 4 hours, witnesses testified about the pattern of discriminatory treatment in Blackwood's courtroom. The statistical analysis was presented, showing undeniable disparities in fines and dismissals based on race. The audio recordings played, revealing the different tones and levels of patience Blackwood exhibited with different defendants. When Andre's turn came, he spoke directly and factually about his experience, then presented the broader evidence of systematic bias. Throughout his testimony, he maintained a professional demeanor, focusing on the pattern rather than personal grievance. During cross-examination, Blackwood's attorney tried to paint Andre as vengeful, using his federal position to settle a personal score. "Isn't it true that you only began this investigation after receiving a fine you felt was unfair?" the attorney asked. "I began this investigation after observing disparate treatment in the courtroom," Andre corrected. "My own experience was simply what brought the issue to my attention." The evidence speaks for itself. This is about a pattern affecting hundreds of people, not about one traffic ticket. Judge Blackwood never took the stand in his own defense. His attorney argued procedural points and questioned the methodology of the statistical analysis. But the evidence was overwhelming. 3 days later, the Judicial Conduct Board released its findings. Judge Blackwood had engaged in a pattern of conduct, demonstrating bias and prejudice based on race and ethnicity. The board recommended a 6-month suspension without pay, mandatory bias training, and ongoing monitoring of his court proceedings. Chief Judge Winters took the recommendation a step further. She called Andre to her office before making the announcement public. "The board's recommendation is just that, a recommendation," she explained. "I've decided that Judge Blackwood will not return to traffic court. He'll be reassigned to property records review after his suspension. Additionally, we're implementing a new oversight system for all traffic courts in the county, with regular statistical reviews of outcomes by race, gender, and income level. That's a significant step, Andre said. Impressed? Your case highlighted a blind spot in our system, the chief judge admitted. We've been focusing on high-profile cases and major crimes, overlooking how everyday interactions in traffic court shape public trust in justice. 2 months later, Andre stood before a room of judges, prosecutors, and public defenders. He had been asked to lead a training session on identifying and addressing implicit bias in the courtroom. What happened in Judge Blackwood's courtroom wasn't just about one judge, Andre explained. It's about systems that allow disparities to continue unnoticed or unchallenged. Each of us has a responsibility to examine our own practices and assumptions. The training program had been Chief Judge Winter's idea, part of a broader initiative to address bias throughout the county court system. Traffic court procedures had been revised, requiring regular data review and creating a simplified process for filing complaints about unfair treatment. After the session, a young public defender approached Andre. "I wanted to thank you," she said. "One of my clients was in traffic court the day you were fined. He told me how differently the judge treated you compared to the white defendants. When he heard what happened later, that you were a federal prosecutor who stood up to the judge, it changed something for him. He said it was the first time he believed justice might actually be possible." Andre nodded, touched by the story. "That's why this matters. Justice isn't just about big cases and headlines. It's about every person feeling they'll be treated fairly when they enter a courtroom." That evening, Andre drove past the county courthouse on his way home. The building looked the same as it had the day he'd entered for his traffic ticket, but something had changed. Inside those walls, a small but meaningful shift had occurred. A reminder that the system could be held accountable, that patterns could be challenged, that change was possible. His phone buzzed with a text from Diane. "How did the training go?" "Good," he replied. "Making progress." And they were. Not perfect progress, not complete transformation, but real steps toward a more just system. All because one person who had the knowledge and resources to challenge unfairness had chosen to do so. Not just for himself, but for everyone who would enter that courtroom in the future. Andre smiled as he drove home. Sometimes justice worked slowly, but it did work, especially when people cared enough to stand up for it.